Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are just past the trade deadline for the 2031 season. It is August 1st, and our Buffalo Wings are 59 and 43, second in the National League East, 6.5 games behind the Mets, and we are 4 up for the final wild card spot in the National League. You can see that we rank third out of 32 teams in the latest power ranking. So although we're 6.5 behind in the division, it's still been a solid season for the Buffalo Wings. Made a few moves in the last episode as we approach the trade deadline. We'll see how those work out over the next couple of months as we try to ensure that we can guide this team back into the playoffs for a fourth consecutive season and hopefully do some damage once we're there. One of my usual pet peeves, as you know, is that the way fan interest deteriorates in this game, and we've been 100 or over all season. We've got one of the top records in baseball. We're selling out or close to selling out almost every game. We've got great fan loyalty, and we've got a big pennant race over the next 2 months, and somehow our fan interest has dipped. But I promise not to talk about that mechanism every season, and yet I find myself doing it, so I should turn over a new leaf as far as that's concerned. And whether you're watching us for the first time or for the 100th time, do appreciate you watching. If you're watching and you haven't subscribed to the channel, would sincerely appreciate it if you do, as we try to find more and more viewers for our little slice of YouTube and the interweb here on Old School Sports. And with the trade deadline passed, we do have a lot of money potentially available. So I'm going to try to spend it. I don't really love Josh Vejar, who is a 4.5-star prospect who we picked up in the 6th round just to take a flyer on. He lasted that long because he's viewed as impossible to sign, and he's asking for crazy money. I do like the fact that he's durable. I do like the fact that if he completely develops, 65 contact and 65 home run power is a pretty proficient combination. So he could definitely be a nice bat. I don't think he's anywhere near worth the money that he's looking for. But in the interest of just trying to learn something, we're going to negotiate with him. He says he's looking for significantly over $14.5 million. As you can see, I only have room for $12,270,622. So I am going to offer him every penny of that. I tend to think it's not going to get the job done. And as Not My Four-Ply noted in a comment to a previous episode, the fact that a player like him would be turning down an 8-digit contract to go spend a year at a junior college and then go back in the draft next year is a little bit unrealistic. But it looks like Vejar has a inflated view of his worth. So I don't generally think that offering him about 80-ish% of what he's looking for has any chance of actually working. But we'll go ahead and submit it anyways and see what happens. I'm actually hoping he won't accept this. I don't really feel like we need him, and I would rather actually try to make some money with this team this year rather than bring him on board, because I do think if we have a successful postseason and we're able to make more money this year than we have in previous seasons, that perhaps we will get a small bump in our budget. I keep hoping every season that's going to happen, and it hasn't happened recently. So actually, to be a little more scientific in the amount I'm going to offer, I'm offering him $3 million less than what he's looking for, but still $11.5 million. You have to be a incredibly special prospect or have incredible family wealth to be willing to turn down that kind of money. Um, I don't think that Josh Vejar is that special of a prospect to be able to turn that down money. Um, I don't know what his background family situation fictionally is in this game. Um, so I tend to think there's no chance that he's going to take this $3 million below what he's asking for, and he says he's looking for significantly over 14.5 million. But it is in August now. It's been about 6 weeks since the draft. So maybe he's had some change in thoughts on his value. Like I said, probably not going to learn too much because I don't think he ends up accepting this offer. But if he does, it's kind of good to know that you can undershoot those numbers pretty significantly and still potentially get a player signed. Again, I don't think that's going to happen, but I like to just do stupid things from time to time to see if I can learn something, to annoy those of you who want me to play everything straight down the middle of the fairway, and to just give myself something to talk about here with you on a lovely evening, morning, or afternoon, depending on when you're listening to this and watching this episode. And looking over our schedule for the month of August, we've got the Reds, who have won a couple of World Series in recent years, the Dodgers, and Atlanta in a very long homestand, topped off by 4 games home against the Mets. So we're basically at home. We're not basically at home. We are at home for the first 2 weeks of the season. Then we go on a road trip to Washington in the Angels, home against Milwaukee, at Montreal, and at the Mets to finish up the month of August. Obviously, the hope is to still win the division. I think our backs are certainly getting close to up against the wall. Probably need to go at least 4-2 against the Mets to have any chance, and obviously 5-1 or 6-0 would be preferable. And I may have jinxed myself a year ago when I mentioned how sanguine the injury situation was for the Wings after the trade deadline last year. It's a similar situation this year. Dansby Swanson still going to be out for about 3 weeks with that strained oblique. But otherwise, no significant injuries on this team. And the goal is to just keep winning more games than we lose, guide this team into the playoffs, and hope that we're healthy when we get there. And we can hopefully make a long run in the 2031 postseason. And we took 2 out of 3 to start off the homestand against the Reds. As I mentioned, we've got the Dodgers and then 4 against Atlanta this week before finishing off with the Mets. The Dodgers are a last place team at 45-60, and the Braves are 48-57. So would certainly hope that we win at least 4 and hopefully 5 of those 7 games against LA and the Braves at home. And things not going well. We're 1-3 in the first 4 games against the Dodgers and the Braves, so we're going to have to win these last 3 just to get the 4 wins that I viewed as being the minimum that we needed. Kelnick, day-to-day with a strained hip flexor for about 2 weeks, and more significantly, Cam Collier, chronic back soreness, going to be out for about 4 weeks. So the guys should both be healthy for the playoffs. We're still 6.5 behind the Mets in second place, but clearly having those 2 guys fully healthy for the rest of the way would help in our efforts to try to catch the Mets. And obviously we put Collier on the IL with the 4-week injury that he was out for, and we decided to also put Kelnick on the IL. He is fragile physically, was going to have a moderate impact on his running, just didn't feel like allowing it to turn into anything more significant. So we're going to bring up a couple of familiar names. Marcus Brown, the veteran who was up a little bit earlier this year when we had some injuries for some infield depth. And then we're going to also bring Tanner Shillette back up. He's a guy who was with us all of last season, has spent the entire year in Albany. He is a catcher slash first baseman slash left fielder. Hit only 249 in Albany, but he does have 19 homers and 393 at-bats. Give him another chance at the major league level, but I don't think he is a large part of our future at this point. And Josh Vejar has signed with us. So for the $11,500,000, which was $3 million less than the amount that he said he needed significantly more than to sign, we were able to get him signed. So interesting that we've got him on board. It stinks that the rookie league season just ended. But that does give us a fourth guy out of this draft who was a five-star prospect at the time we drafted them. As I noted, we only think Josh Vejar is 4.5-star potential at this point. So clearly that is going to significantly change our financial outlook for the season, but wanted to see whether it was possible, and the draft signing deadline was coming up on August 20th, so we were getting close to that. So next time around, I'll try $4 or $5 million less than the $3 million we just tried, and see if maybe we can get somebody signed. Probably wasn't the right decision, given that my goal is really, as I said, to have a profitable year this year, and spending $11.5 million on him doesn't help with that one bit, or $11.5 million with him doesn't help with that. I can argue that no matter what I do, I'm kind of stuck in this $220 to $230 million range as far as our budget. But certainly, if we had another $11.5 million going towards the bottom line, that would help in the effort to deliver a profitable season. So at this point, it's going to be dependent on us going on a long playoff run and having a lot of games with a large home gate for the playoffs to hopefully help us have a profitable season this year. And if we go on a long playoff run that's long enough to guarantee us a profitable season, then hopefully maybe we'll see a little movement in the budget history. But Vejar is now on board with us, even though the season is over. And he certainly does look like one of the top prospects on our rookie league team, along with Brady, Tylee, and Vilpando, who are the three guys we took in the first, second, and third round this year. To have a guy like Josh Vejar on board with them, only 17 years old. Like I said, obviously wish he got a little bit of playing time this year, but another prospect in our system, and another guy who maybe we roll the dice and hit on. Maybe we use him in a few years as trade bait to add some talent into the organization, and roll the dice as many times as we can with these prospects. And there's another high ceiling prospect in our minor league system. And although I obviously focused on Vejar most recently, we did win the last three against Atlanta to salvage a 4-3 record against Atlanta and the Dodgers. We've closed the gap on the Mets to 4.5. So if we can take 2 out of 3 here, make up another game in the standings on the Mets. No guarantees that we're going to be able to catch up to them. They currently still have the second best record in baseball, behind only the Royals, but we've made up a little ground on them, 2 games in the last 10. Hopefully we can make up at least one more game on them over these next 3. And we did end up taking 2 out of 3 against the Mets. And then, of course, we go on the road and we lose the first 2 to Washington. So we still end up 5 behind in third place, despite the fact that we took 2 out of 3 against New York. The Nationals have now moved ahead of us in the standings, winning the first 2 of this series. Hopefully we get the win in the third game against them. They are 9-1 over their last 10, so they have closed the gap on both us and the Mets in recent days, and obviously have more than closed the gap on us, now a game ahead of us in the standings after taking the first two of the series. And unfortunately, we ended up getting swept by Washington. So after a respectable homestand and feeling real good, taking 2 out of 3 against the Mets, 4-1, 5-0, and 4-1 losses at Washington, puts us 5 games. Well, we're still 5 games behind the Mets, but we're now a couple games behind Washington in the standings as well. We're up 5 for the final wild card, and we're up 3.5 in our battle to be able to host a wild card series. So still not in a horrible spot as far as that's concerned. But clearly, just a few days, we're thinking we had a shot at the division, and getting swept by Washington doesn't help with that. We've got the Angels, Milwaukee, and Montreal before finishing off with 3 against the Mets. The Angels, one of the better teams in the American League. Montreal, one of the worst teams in baseball. And I've already forgotten who the other team was. The Brewers. Okay, I was going to guess it was the Brewers. And the Brewers are a pretty mediocre team in the AL East. So not a horrible schedule for us, particularly if we can take 2 out of 3 on the road in Los Angeles. That should hopefully set us up for a successful week and a half of baseball before we finish off against the Mets. Dansby Swanson came back from his injury yesterday, and Jared Kelenic is now ready to come back as well. Cam Collier still 2 to 3 weeks away, so he'll certainly be added to the roster, hopefully very early in September after we get to September roster expansion. And unfortunately, we lost 2 out of 3 in Anaheim before we did take 2 out of 3 at home against Milwaukee. Got our last 7 games of the month all on the road at this point. Montreal, as we've talked about, one of the worst teams in baseball. Even though we're on the road, we probably got to take 3 out of 4 there. And then we certainly need to take 2 out of 3 against the Mets. Probably need to sweep the Mets, quite honestly. You can see we're 8 games behind at this point. Not playing incredibly. We're 2 behind the Nationals for the top wild card spot. And we've a 3.5 game lead on the Reds and the Cubs for the final 2 wild card spots in the National League. But you can see the Cardinals, Reds, and Cubs are all separated by only half a game. So it's going to be real interesting to see how that battle for the NL West goes down the stretch. And that road trip over the last week in August was brutal. We lost 3 out of 4 to the last place Expos, and then lost 2 out of 3 to the first place Mets. So similar to last season, we get past the trade deadline feeling good about ourselves, and we get into August and everything starts falling apart. 11 behind in the division now as of September 1st. Still up 3.5 on the final wild card spot, so still feel like we should definitely be a playoff team, but a disappointing August for sure for the Buffalo Wings. Take a look at the team statistics, and you can see it, a 13-16 record. It was our first losing month of the season. We rank 4th in the National League in runs scored right now, and 2nd in runs allowed, so we're in the top quarter of teams in the league in offense, and we're 2nd best in not allowing teams to score. We've got good defense. We're 5 games below our Pythagorean expectations. We should be 77-54, so hopefully that's a sign that we'll get a little luckier here in the month of September. I think 11 games behind with looks like 31 games to go. Hard to imagine that we're going to be able to catch the Mets, unfortunately, but certainly would like to keep ourselves in a position where we are hosting a wild card series in the first round, and would love to get past the Nationals for the best record in the National League among a non-division winner to ensure that we not only have a home wild card series, but we hopefully have the easiest matchup, whoever it ends up being. Taking a look at the league leaders as we head into the final month of the season, Deshaun Seifu looks like he's well on his way to leading the National League in stolen bases once again with 50. And he also ranks third in batter WAR at this point, only 4.5, so not a bunch of huge offensive seasons apparently in the National League this year. And obviously defense is going to factor into that as well. But hitting 294 this year, 37 doubles, 9 triples, those 50 steals, which are poised to lead the league again. 109 WRC plus in the 4.5 WAR that we mentioned. So a nice season once again from Mr. Seifu. Doesn't look like we have any pitchers among the top 3 in the key pitching categories here, despite the fact that we have the second best overall pitching staff in the National League at this point. And for our September call-ups, we're going to bring up Shaylin Polanco. You may remember we traded almost a year ago to pick him up from Miami when we were just looking for anyone who could help as a corner outfielder. He hit 265 with 27 homers in AAA this year. Looks like he's probably a 4A kind of guy, but he's competent defensively, a little bit of pop in his bat. We'll see what we can get out of him over the final few weeks of the season. And pitching-wise, we're going to let Drew Graham make his major league debut. This is a guy that we picked in the 4th round back in 2024, our second draft with the Buffalo Wings. 25 years old, had a very slow rise up through our farm system. His profile looks like a replacement-ish level major league pitcher, but he was 11-9 this year in AAA Albany after going 13-11 a year ago. Dropped his ERA by 1/4 of a run a game. Don't think he is a big-time part of our future, but might as well see what he can do working out of the bullpen over the last month of the season. And we're only 3 days away from a potential return by Cam Collier, which should obviously tighten up our offense and our defense over the final month of the season as we try to, at the very least, hopefully get past Washington in the standings. And as we try to turn things around a bit in the month of September, we're going to be facing off against the Marlins at home and then at Houston to get the month started. The Marlins are a middling 63-68, and Houston is a middling 66-64. So clearly this looks like an opportunity if we want to make up some ground in the standings on the Nationals. Hopefully playing 2 teams that are essentially out of it should help us out. The Marlins 5.5 out for a wild card, and Houston, I guess Houston's only 1.5 out for a wild card, so they're still playing for something, but hopefully we can help end the season of the Astros by winning that series. And we definitely did what we needed to that first week in September. Took 2 out of 3 against Miami, and then we swept Houston on the road. So we've got Kansas City, the best team in baseball, at home, followed by Colorado this upcoming week. Kansas City, as I mentioned, the top record in baseball, although just barely now over the Mets. And then Colorado at 64-72, not having quite as good a year. We have gotten back past the Nationals by a game for the number 1 wild card spot, and we're 6.5 up on the final wild card at this point. So that is positive. But obviously want to keep some good momentum going with 5 wins in a row, even though we've got a tough series against the Royals coming up. Cam Collier is back now, so the team is relatively healthy. Austin Riley had some back stiffness, so just to be very conservative with him, we put him on the 10-day IL to open up the roster spot for us when Collier was ready to come back. And Adley Rutschman, who had been having a rough year for us, is finally catching fire. 11-game extra base hit streak, which is a pretty nice achievement. Austin Riley now ready to come off of the IL, so we're going to have some decisions to make there. We did lose 2 out of 3 against Kansas City, the best team in baseball, but we've at least taken the first 2 against Colorado. 8.5 behind, so we've dropped a further game behind the Mets as we head into the final game of that series with Colorado. We have opened up a 2-game lead on the Nationals now, and still 6.5 up on that final wild card spot, where our magic number is down to 12. Coincidentally, the same magic number that the Mets now have to win the NL East. And we did end up getting the sweep at home against Colorado, 1-0 shutout victory. Shohei Ohtani with the shutout win, and with that performance, actually Ohtani was already well over the 162 innings. So his contract next year, the vesting option, has kicked in, needed 162 innings pitched this year. As I mentioned in the comments, I'm not 100% confident whether we'll be using Ohtani as a pitcher or as a hitter next year, but he will be back with us for the 2032 season, which will likely be his final year with us. But a 2-hitter over 8 innings, struck out 10, nice performance to even his record at 10-10. And his ERA is a sound 3.53 for the season. Take a look at the standings here as we head into the final 2.5, 3 weeks of the season. Still 8.5 behind the Mets. Still 6.5 up for the number 1 wild card spot in the, or 6.5 up on the final wild card spot in the National League. I guess we're technically 2 up on the Nationals for the number 1 wild card spot. Taking a look at our schedule for this week, at the Giants and at the Cardinals. Looking at those teams in the standings, the Giants are in that wild card mix, holding on to the final wild card spot. And with the Cardinals right now, actually, those are the 3rd and 4th wild cards. So could definitely be a preview of a wild card series this week with the 2 matchups we have. Hopefully, though, we'll be playing those games if we do have a wild card matchup at home rather than on the road like we are this week. And it was another good week for the Buffalo Wings. Took 2 out of 3 against San Francisco, and then we swept St. Louis on the road. So that was good to beat those potential teams that will be playing in a wild card series pretty handily on the road. We've closed the gap to 5.5 on the Mets. I don't think there's enough time left for us to get past them. Clearly a big series against Washington this week, and then also home against Pittsburgh. Taking a look at the standings at this point, we're up 3 on Washington, and we are up 10.5 for the final wild card spot at this point. So if we take that series against the Nationals, we're going to put ourselves in a really good position to, at the very least, ensure that we have the number 1 wild card spot in the National League. The Mets' magic number is 8. You know, it's not impossible for us to catch him, but it's certainly going to be difficult. And it was another good week for the Wings. We took 2 out of 3 at home against Washington, 2 out of 3 at home against Pittsburgh. We've got 3 in Atlanta, and then 4 at home against Philadelphia to finish off the season. Unfortunately, the Mets also playing pretty well, so we haven't made up any ground on them. We have clinched a wild card spot, and you can see we're up 5 for the number 1 wild card spot. So certainly should have the easiest potential matchup among the wild card teams. The Mets' magic number is down to 2, so we basically need to be perfect the rest of the way and hope that the Mets completely fall apart over our final 7 games of the season for us and the final 6 games of the season for the Mets. And we finished the month of September winning those final 2 games against the Braves. So definitely turned things around. Good to hopefully be heading into the playoffs feeling better about ourselves, but a impressive 20-6 record for the month of September. So by far the best month that the Wings have had this year. rank third in the National League in runs scored, first in runs allowed, and we should, in theory, be even 3 games better than we are. But with 92 wins this year, it's been a nice bounce back. The only negative thing is we're still 5.5 behind the Mets because they have won both of their games that they've played, so they have clinched the division at this point. We are up 5 on the Nationals for the number 1 spot, so we've got one more game that potentially matters here against Atlanta. And if we can win this one, then we just need to worry about setting up our pitching rotation for the playoffs to ensure that we've got everyone lined up the way that we want them to be for the potential playoff series against the Giants, the Cardinals, or I guess possibly the Phillies. And we did win against Atlanta to sweep the series. So now with 4 games left, we are up 5 on the Nationals. So we are locked in as the number 1 wild card team in the National League at this point. Only question for us is whether we will be facing off against the Giants or the Cardinals in that best out of 3 wild card series in about a week from now. So we are going to get to set up the rotation the way that we want to. So hopefully we are pretty well rested with the top of our staff for the time we're going to have that wild card series. Not the worst thing in the world that the Giants and the Cardinals are both jockeying for position. So even though they both are likely to be in the playoffs, the Giants are already in, and the Cardinals almost certainly will be. They still are trying to figure out whether they're going to be on the road in Washington or Buffalo. So maybe a little bit for those teams to play for, and they won't be able to completely rest their pitching staffs over this final half week of the season. And the series against Philadelphia did not go particularly well. We won only 1 out of 4, but we were not really playing for anything. We were just trying to set ourselves up for the wild card series where we are going to have home field advantage against the San Francisco Giants. And I think that we did that. Taking a look at the team, we are also healthy. Luis Castillo has back stiffness that's going to impact him for 1 day. We've got a day off before the playoff series starts. Other than that, we are as healthy as we've been all season. So we just need to figure out who's going to be on our 26-man roster and then get ready for the playoff series. You can see for the year, Cam Collier 299, Deshaun Seifu 291, and Vance Honeycutt 287. Probably our 3 most important players, with the exception of Rutschman leading the team in batting average. Basallo got over 30 home runs again. Honeycutt led the team in ribbies, and Seifu, not surprisingly, led the team in steals. Ohtani with the best ERA on the team. Harleen Susanna with 16 wins that tied for the league lead or led the league lead when all was said and done. Ohtani also leading the team in strikeouts and innings pitched. Taking a look at the full standings here, our 94 and 68 record, 6 games behind the Mets in the division, but it was tied with the Royals for the 3rd best record in baseball. Angels ended up getting past the Royals at 96 and 66. The Royals finished 2 and 8. So we're tied for the 3rd best record in baseball. And as I talked about, we will be hosting the San Francisco Giants in the wild card series. The Reds, the Cardinals, and the Giants ended up in a epic battle for the National League West that was ultimately, looks like, won by the Cincinnati Reds. Taking a look at the leaderboard, as we talked about, Seifu once again led the league in stolen bases pretty easily, although the number is not as prodigious as it has been in previous seasons. And Harleen Susanna, as I mentioned, ended up in at least a 4-way tie for the National League lead in wins with 16, along with Jamie Arnold, Jamie Hayes, and Jackson Jobe. So apparently if you're name begins with a J, you were going to win a lot of games in the National League this season. So our Wings are back in the playoffs for a fourth consecutive series. As I mentioned, we've got a day off to rest up before beginning that series against the Giants, 94-68. So that marks the second best win total we've had in these 6 years as GM/manager of the Buffalo Wings. Obviously, would love to win a second division title one of these years to get out of that wild card game, but in these 8-team divisions we're playing with, it's hard to win a division title. So going to hopefully take at least 2 out of 3, or maybe just 2 in a row against San Francisco, and move on to the NLDS in all hopefulness. And then we'll see what happens there. Taking a look at the financial situation, obviously spending the money for the draft pick has us projected to lose around $8 million this year. But certainly if we can get past the wild card series and into the division series, we can probably get close to at least break even on the year. And if we make it to the NLCS and or the World Series, would think that we will probably end up profitable on the year, which would be a nice step in a positive direction to see if there's any possible way we can get off this $220 to $230 million payroll treadmill. I would think certainly based on what happened this season, would hope that we will get an extension from ownership. Our contract is up at the end of this year, but would think with 4 consecutive playoff appearances and a good reputation at this point that hopefully our friends here in Buffalo will be willing to bring us back next year. And we will find out how these Buffalo Wings do in the playoffs in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.